Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to part one of a special four-part series on At Issue. We're weeks away from the August 6th primaries, when Mississippians will go to the polls to choose which candidate will represent each party on the November ballot. All 8 statewide offices are up for grabs this year, and At Issue is taking a closer look at some of the candidates. At Issue tonight, the lieutenant governor's race. Secretary of State Delbert Hosemann is running against Shane Quick of DeSoto County in the Republican primary. Running unopposed in the Democratic primary is State Representative Jay Hughes of Oxford. At Issue producer Ashley Norwood spoke with the candidates on the campaign trail about their position on the issues. Delbert Hosemann has served as Secretary of State for 12 years. He says if he's elected lieutenant governor, he wants to focus on workforce training and development. Hosemann says that's important and needs to be embedded in all high schools.
When I was in Waynesboro, I went to their junior college process. It's Jones County Junior College, JCJC is called. And they were teaching young men and women, some of which were coming from the high school, the ability to be pipe fitters and welders. And while I was there, we have about 15 of them being trained, just about a year-and-a-half program. All of them get jobs. They start anywhere from $25 to $40 per hour. They also come back and live in that community. Like one business that I went to there, university was just started with a husband and a wife. The wife is a majority owner, actually, and then 2 or 3 other employees. Now they have 140 employees. So when we have this education component in the high schools and the community colleges working together to give significant skills to individuals who can get a meaningful job at $30 or $40 an hour, they end up staying in that community. They have jobs out of there. They may go work at Ingalls, for example, or they may go work for one of the construction companies in Hattiesburg, but they come back and live in that community. So we want to make sure that our community colleges are embedded in the high school system. And there are other reasons for that. That gives these young men and women a course forward earlier in their life. It cuts down on student debt, where we don't have another year where somebody has to borrow money or stay out of school or live with mom and dad or whatever to try to earn a degree that would be helpful. And we're seeing this proliferate already in Mississippi. I was reading in the newspaper a young lady from Vicksburg who has a strong relationship with a community college over there, graduated with an LPN and a high school degree the same day. When I was in Gulfport, a young man came up to me, and I was at about 9:30 in the morning. I said, "Where are you going?" "Well, I'm going to community college." I said, "Oh, that's great." And I said, "Aren't you leaving a little early? You know, it's 9:30. He said, "Oh, no, sir." He said, "You know, I'll graduate from community college and high school the same day. And I am the first member of my family ever to get an advanced degree." That's where we're headed in Mississippi. And the fact that we can give our young men and women an opportunity to go forward without waiting till after school.
Hosemann continues his conversation with producer Ashley Norwood by saying his leadership style in the Secretary of State's office will not change if elected lieutenant governor. He says it's time to take inventory of state government, its officials, and how they serve Mississippians.
Now, as lieutenant governor, you'll be presiding over the Senate. What are some things you would like to see done differently in that seat?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny, just the same thing that I just talked to you about. When we did the voter ID bill, when I did every pieces of those legislation, including the autism bill, all of those, I would get everybody in the room, in a conference room, and we would have what I called a work-study group. And those groups really would be people who are opposed to it and in favor of it, and people who had some knowledge about one part of it. Like in voter ID, it would be like the circuit clerks who had to administer this, and you may have people that were opposed to it, the League of Women Voters that may have been for it, or whomever. I got them all up in a room, and we talked about what's the best way to do this. I believe strongly in the aggregate intellect, and that's where we have a better product. So my leadership in the lieutenant governor is not going to change from my leadership in the Secretary of State's office. The issues that we will face, and I'll go over some of those I think are important, but the issues that we face, we will bring our committee chair and our committee members and both sides of issues. That's the way we got voter ID through without getting sued. Now, that's the way we brought people together. I've had numerous bills passed in the legislature. I have been through that process on all those ones I told you about. Some of them are very controversial, like voter ID. Some of them have been dead on arrival forever, like autism. Others were very complicated, like LLCs. But all of them, we do the same way. We get everybody together, we figure out what's best for Mississippi, and then we get everybody headed in the same direction. And so you'll see, I think, my management style is not going to change. You know, you'll see a lot of different people getting in a room trying to work out what would be best for Mississippi, and it comes out better that way. We're going to reorganize state government. And I told you before, we answer 65,000 phone calls and we're paperless in Mississippi. If you don't answer the phone for people that are paying you, maybe you ought not be an agency. So we are going to look hard at building state government from the ground up. I've been working on this for 5 years, on how state government will function as efficiently as possible. And there are over 200 agency boards and commissions, and I think we need to have a good, healthy look at what everybody's supposed to be doing, what is everybody actually doing, but more importantly, what does a citizen need done? You know, we need them to answer the phone. We need highway patrolmen. We need, you know, we need health care. Our rural health care will be one of the things we work on specifically. I don't want anybody in Mississippi to be further than 30 minutes away from an emergency room that can take care of them. So we will analyze every bit of that. And I'm very hopeful. Change is difficult, but I've never thought that we always did it that way means we ought to always do it that way. So you'll see us take a long, clear look. My budget this year, I asked for is less than the day I started 12 years ago. We can run our government better. And when I get that money, it's going into education, healthcare, and infrastructure. So the savings will be passed back to the people who paid it.
Hosemann's Republican opponent, Shane Quick, was unable to speak with us. However, you can find more information about him and his campaign at mpbonline.org/election. It's MPB's online platform for Mississippians to gain insight about candidates running for office. Jay Hughes of Oxford is running unopposed in the Democratic primary for lieutenant governor. Hughes is an attorney and a member of the State House of Representatives. He says presiding over the state Senate as lieutenant governor would enable him to impact policy on issues important to him, like reforming the current model of state testing and equal access to quality public education.
Education is who I am. It's not just a campaign slogan. My sister and I were the first generation to go to college in our family, and it broke a cycle of poverty and poor. And to me, public education is the great equalizer. And Mississippi for far too long has struggled with disparity in the schools and highest poverty rate, highest teen birth rate, highest everything. And education would make such an impact on that, quality public education in all districts where the students would have the same resources. And I've seen it firsthand. I've gone from signing the backs of paychecks to the fronts of paychecks, and I have employees, and I've been an employee. And I know that what I'm looking for we just don't see anymore, and that is a well-rounded graduate from high school who's got initiative, who is ready to learn, who's got skill sets. Public education is the greatest economic investment we can make in Mississippi. That's what attracts jobs, business, industry, is a workforce. And we don't have that right now.
What do you think you can do, if successful in this office, to alleviate some of those issues?
The biggest problem with public education in Mississippi is a lack of respect by our elected officials, of the teachers, of the schools. It's almost become an I got mine, you get yours. And what's a shame is all of these elected officials that are now running for higher office have all of a sudden discovered public schools and teachers in 2019. While there's been nothing done to help them in the last 4 years. Every bill we introduced for adequate funding, for pay raise for teachers, pay raise for state employees, all of these things that would have helped, those bills have been killed every single year. Now that it's an election year, we're back to the hopes and promises, and it'll be back to the same thing unless you elect a candidate like me who truly believes that it all starts with education. What can I do as an elected official that would be the lieutenant governor? I could put people on the education committee that truly have a vested interest in public schools, who have attended public schools, instead of those that have only been in private schools their entire lives, and their children do too. I would make a condition for the members of the education committee that you need to go shadow a teacher from 7A to 7P in an A district, C district, and an F district. So when we're taking up bills, they've actually been in a classroom and understand what it does. Doesn't make them a teacher, but we need to have people that understand education. And then I would offer respect to not just the teachers and educators and students, I'd offer it to the senators in there and find out what's important to them, and we would compromise. That's what I would bring to it. Imagine a marriage without compromise. I don't know why politicians think that now this my way or the highway is the best way to do it.
Hughes just completed a 4-year term in the House. During that time, he served on several committees, including Accountability, Efficiency, Transparency, that is, Judiciary A, and Medicaid. He tells At Issue producer Ashley Norwood healthcare in Mississippi is critically ill.
While I say it all starts with education, it does. But you know, the interesting part for me on healthcare, we're losing that battle. Mississippi's rural healthcare system is on life support. You've got 5 counties with no emergency room at all. It matters. So and I tie infrastructure and healthcare together, because when you have a closed bridge or a closed road, that can be a death sentence to someone if it's a 911 call and it's an ambulance responding. So to me, it's cute to watch all these career politicians come up with every way to say Medicaid expansion, but without calling it that. Medicaid reform and economically feasible, well-balanced. Look, the reality is we're leaving $1 billion a year on the table, and all of the states around us are getting it, and we're closing rural hospitals, and that's 12,000 jobs we don't have. So say it, that's what we need.
You're the only Democrat in this race. So what does that mean to you?
It just means I'm Jay and I'm busting my tail every single day. It means we've been working hard and connecting, listening to all voters, and I think that meant we had a presence, that people were listening, and they said, you know what, Jay's willing to be the voice for everybody, and we're going to get behind him and give him a chance. I think what's important for the viewer to know about Jay, know about me. I got my values, my morals, my ethics at home from my parents and in my church. I didn't get them from a political party. I've never sent or received a dollar, phone call, or email to any national party, and never will. I am Jay. I use my life experiences, the sum of my life experiences, to decide what is right. I do what I think is right, and I risk the consequences. That's who I am. It's who I'll always be. You won't always agree with me, but you'll always know where I stand and why I stand.
So let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is an attorney and former Democratic member of the House. Austin Barber is a Republican national strategist and founder of the Clearwater Group. Good to have both of you all with us during this election season that is getting closer and closer. Let's start by talking about the lieutenant governor's race. Brandon, Delbert Hosemann obviously has statewide name recognition. Do you think that's going to be enough for him to overcome a challenge by Jay Hughes?
I don't know if we've ever seen anyone in modern Mississippi politics who benefited more from a 30-second ad than Delbert Hosemann. I mean, 12 years ago when he ran for Secretary of State, he had that very effective ad where the lady mispronounces his name, and
Delbert, yes. It
really got something started. And what that did was it added a little bit of personality to a guy who describes himself as kind of a workaday person, kind of a, as you just saw in that clip. I mean, you know, he's just. He doesn't exactly jump out at you, so to speak. So he's got great name ID. I think that he's going to be very difficult to beat. There were 2 things that he said during that last segment that I think are notable. One of them was he talked about reorganizing state government. I think anyone who's been an observer of state government and seen the way that Mr. Hosemann has expanded that Secretary of State's office ought to be wondering what that means. I don't know if that means he's going to have senators auditing tax returns or not, but that's an interesting comment for him to make. And then saying the style will not change. He is right. He helped pass voter ID, but I happen to be a part of those study committees, and there was a strong push from large segments of the population to have a better voter ID a better early voting mechanism in this state. And he didn't listen to those voices, and our governor, Haley Barbour, at the time was also a proponent of that. So, it'll be interesting to see how his management style plays out, but certainly he's got name ID and he's an effective campaigner.
Yeah, he is. It is amazing. Brandon and I were talking as we were listening to Delbert in past speeches and so forth. It's phenomenal to think that here is a guy who's not your typical get on the stump, bang it out kind of speech guy. He is very methodical with his approach. His tone is always, so that straight kind of cadence. He's done a fantastic job. It's hard to find someone who will say Delbert Hosemann has messed up the Secretary of State's office. Some people may critique him on tide lands or may critique him on 16-section land. For the most part, people say he's done a really good job. He's done a phenomenal job of working Republicans around the state. Not just saying, well, my base is Warren County where I grew up and Metro Jackson where I live now. He has expanded that base, not just in the past 12 months as he's been running for lieutenant governor, but for years before. And I would say even reaching out to moderates and independents who were interested in his, I think, which will be a sort of a pragmatic approach to fixing things in Mississippi.
Hosemann, of course, is the incumbent Secretary of State, which means there will be a vacancy in the Secretary of State's office next year. The candidates running in that primary on the Republican side, Sam Britton, the Southern District PSC Commissioner, Michael Watson of Pascagoula, who's a state senator, and on the Democratic side, Johnny Dupree, former mayor of Hattiesburg and former Democratic nominee for governor, and also Mariah Hodges Hunt of Kruger. Sam Britton and Michael Watson in the Republican primary. Is the name recognition there a factor, you think, in that race as well?
It will be. Now, look, full disclosure, Sam Britton is a client of mine. Sam Britton is a longtime friend of mine. So I want to be candid and honest about that. Brandon and I both have known Michael for a long time. I was at Ole Miss with him. Of course, you grew up in Jackson County with him, so we know both these guys really well. It'll be a close race. They both have been able to raise a bunch of money, well-funded campaigns, have support from big-name people. Look, Michael Watson's got the support of Phil Bryant. Sam Britton is able to point to his record as the one-term Southern District Commissioner for the PSC to say, hey, I went and got the Kemper County deal done, which was unable to get resolved. I made that a focus. I did that without allowing the ratepayers to have to go pay millions and billions of dollars that would have been passed along to them by Southern Company, by Mississippi Power, who of course was building the Kemper County project. So both candidates are conservative. They'll point to their credentials. They certainly will have differences on some policy issues and some things in their background. But it'll be a competitive race all the way to the end, and we'll see what's happening. But I don't think name ID, certainly neither one of them had a whole lot of name ID before. Michael just being a state senator from Jackson County, Sam being elected for just one term, obviously to a third of the state, but still not a lot of name ID. But as we know, you can buy name ID at the TV station. And they're both trying to do that as best as they possibly can. One
of those gentlemen will face either Johnny Dupree or Mariah Hodges Hunt in the general election. Obviously, Johnny Dupree made a big name for himself when he ran for governor.
One of the most effective local officials in Mississippi history. I mean, as a member of the Board of Supervisors for Forrest County, he oversaw Forrest County become one of the major tax bases in the entire state, and then had a very successful run as mayor of Hattiesburg. And the hub city has grown into be just one of the really great places to live in all of Mississippi and to put a business. And so Mayor Dupree has been very effective. He was a surprise when he overcame Bill Luckett for the nomination in 2009. And so, you're talking about a very serious person, 2011, very serious candidate. He will run hard. you take him lightly at your own peril. I will say this, I was doing a little experiment. You mentioned 16-section land and titlings being a part of the Secretary of State's office. I just wanted to see what all this job does, because I mentioned it had grown. Business filing, charities, public land, sports contracts, scrap metal, sale of securities, and then kind of at the bottom, elections, because they are our chief elections officer. This is such a big job. And I think Michael Watson even suggested that he would like to bring driver's licenses under Secretary. I mean, please do not grow that thing anymore. But this is a huge job. I think Johnny can sell. He's the only one with executive experience of the kind that really matters. I mean, at the county level and at a major city level, he can really sell that in the general. We'll see how that plays out.
Well, and Johnny Dupree being the nominee will be extremely important for Jim Hood, because I think Jim Hood is going to be the nominee in the governor's race. I'm not trying to skip forward to that, but Johnny Dupree's ability to help drive out African American vote, particularly in the Pine Belt, particularly on the coast, is going to be extremely important for Jim Hood, and so that'll mean that the general election is not just going to be a cakewalk for Sam Britton, for Michael Watson, whoever wins the Republican primary.
Well, let's move on to the governor's race that you mentioned. It's been interesting already so far. We've got Tate Reeves, Robert Foster, and Bill Waller Jr. running in the Republican primary, of course. Jim Hood, Robert Schuler Smith, Felicia Williams among the candidates running on the Democratic side. Does Tate Reeves have this thing locked up, you think, Austin?
Nothing's ever locked up in politics. I mean, just remember that. We've all seen too many examples, including recent examples of 2016 when everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, and she didn't. National polls, public polls, private polls showed that Hillary was going to win, and she didn't. So Tate Reeves is in an extremely strong position to win the Republican primary without it going to a runoff. I've seen polling that shows that. Obviously, Bill Waller is the closest opponent to him. Robert Foster has made some waves this week and gotten a lot of national attention, but he has a long way to go.
But that attention that he's gotten for his comments about a ride along with a female reporter was that enough to get him name recognition, perhaps some support even, to offset the balance a little bit of the possibility of a runoff in that race?
You just never know. I don't think so, because we still have 3.5 weeks left. And is he able to keep that momentum, name ID, press, earned media going for that time period? I doubt it. Well, I know he's not. He has to get some new issues to come up. Is he able to raise enough money to make a difference? It's just very difficult. No offense to him, but it's just sort of a reality. But we'll see. My prediction is that Tate Reeves will win this race, will be the Republican nominee, and will do it without going to a runoff. But we'll see. It could be extremely close in terms of whether it goes to a runoff or not. I'm
curious to know if this Robert Foster dust-up maybe changes the numbers somewhat. I agree with you. I think he's a safe 3 out of 3. I think he's in third place. I think he stays in third place. But it's clear that he doubled down on that. I mean, and look, I found it to be sexist. I don't think you tell a woman reporter that she can't participate in the process and that you can't supply somebody as your campaign to be a part of that to satisfy whatever concerns you have. But putting that aside, he doubled down on it because he believes it was resonating with some part of the Republican primary vote. Sure. If he can expand that vote enough, it could create some kind of interesting situation there.
Yeah, I just think Tate Reeves, I just feel like his name ID, the things that he has done, obviously for 2 terms as a lieutenant governor, that conservatives believe in, his campaign is running a great campaign. I think he's going to get over 50. I think his support is there to get him over 50 and avoid the runoff, which obviously you don't want to be in a runoff. You don't want to have to spend those resources and that time. You want to start focusing on Jim Hood in the general election. I just think if Foster is able to garner more support, I think he may take it for Bill Waller.
And of course, Wilson, you mentioned there's a 9-person race there for the governor's nomination on the Democratic side. For me, I thought the most formidable opponent to Jim Hood was Mayor Philip West. I really did, out of Natchez. He's been elected for 30 years. He had served at the county level. He had served at the city level. He had served on the school board. He had been the caucus chair in the House. I mean, his name, he goes by Bucket, but I mean, he is a well-known entity in Southwest Mississippi. Whenever he got out of the race and endorsed Jim Hood, I think that created that opportunity for Jim to get the nomination over these other candidates. That would be a big feat. I think if Tate and Hood can come out of their respective primaries without a runoff, that's a big sign of strength. And if one of them does get hung up in a runoff, it gives some bit of momentum, a little bit of cachet to the other candidate. And so that's why I think these other moving parts do sort of matter. I think you and I agree it'll ultimately come down to Reeves versus Hood.
Yeah, no question about that. But it's interesting that Robert Schuler Smith has not done more than what he's done. I mean, you would have a better insight of what's going on in the Democrat primary and what their operations are doing. But I live here in Hinds County, I don't see hardly anything.
I'm surprised by that because when you're in a major elected post, countywide post, in the biggest, most important county, I think in the state, in Hinds County, but also, frankly, in the Democratic primary, unquestionably.
Yeah.
I mean, it garners anywhere from 25 to 33% of the overall Democratic primary participation. So you would think he would start out with something of maybe not an advantage running against a statewide candidate, but certainly some traction. And so we just haven't seen that campaign launch. We haven't seen that campaign take off, and I don't know what to attribute that to.
Better hurry up.
Yeah, I mean, we're now days, weeks away.
And there's a lot that could happen between now, not only between now and primary election day, but of course now and general election day. We'll have much more conversations about this as we get closer, as we continue our 4-part series leading up to Election Day. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us again on At Issue. We are out of time, and don't forget you can watch this program plus more from the candidates on our election website, mpbonline.org/election. We invite you to tune in to At Issue next Friday night. We'll hear from the Democratic candidates running for governor. Thank you for joining us. Good night.